I know we've all heard the saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you, but one that we haven't heard before is you can't force that you can't force a hand that was never feeding you in the first place. You can't force the hand that was never seeking to feed you anyway. And I want to kind of talk about what that means in the aspect of love, respect, and boundaries. So relationship. Sometimes the hand that was supposed to feed you never fed you. And what they were feeding you was nothing. It's not about what they were feeding you and more about what they didn't feed you, what they would not feed you, as I would like to say. A good kind of visual you can get from this is imagine a mother or caretaker, guardian, whatever. They're supposed to be feeding their baby the food. They're sitting there, they're sitting across the baby's in their little feeding chair, and the baby knows they're about to get fed. But instead, they are fed nothing. Mom goes, here comes the airplane. The baby's opening their mouth, you, and instead, they feed themselves. And so, a relationship and a dynamic, especially family ones, familial ones, but also partnerships, any type of friendship, even work related, can all look something similar to that. And so that's why it's so important and why I teach and talk about the importance of self service. Because how I grew up, I was taught all those amazing things about family, but my life never truly reflected that. The people in my life who told me that never stayed true to those messages. So they were lies. Lies that were told as old as stories and folktale. I teach about and I talk about and I speculate. I speculate certain things. On my channel, I will make speculations about others until I have the information to ground them. And I will come back with grounded research. For the most part, I speak about self governance, self sovereignty, all about self. Because anything else, relying on a human being, never did me any justice. What did me justice was self accountability. What did me justice was no longer giving people the benefit of the doubt. The benefit of the doubt is very interesting because it's the state between what you already know to be true and denial of maybe little pieces of it. So on one hand, you know something is off. You know that something has been off. And so you notice it, but because it's just one person, but because it's supposed to be your family, but because it's supposed to be the best friend that you had through childhood, you allow an exception. Doubt. And that gives them the benefit. And this is another reason why I say, even recklessness, even the most reckless of people are aware of their behaviors. Because the most reckless people were given multiple opportunities. And as you get older, when you go through trauma, or when you go through something, you will recognize how you've been given plenty of chances to do something different. And so if that happened to you, it has definitely happened to those who have been reckless with you for the entirety of your life. And it may not have not just been physically, but they've also been aware of things spiritually, energetically. So when it comes to understanding love and boundaries and respect, we need to get that we need to get that thing clear, which is the fact that these people that I've just described are toxic. Toxicity is a term that is characterized by people's traits, and then it can be observed through their relationships and dynamics. And finally, it can be confirmed or further observed by how sustainably or sustainable they're able to last, how long those relationships are able to last. So that includes romantic partners, that includes jobs, that includes even their mere decisions. It includes um, even things like relationships with things that they start and then they go back on it. You know, um, things that all those things, right? Or like living situations, basically living situations, right? So everything you could observe about these people will follow as toxic. So we are all well aware of what that looks like. It's it's actually the role model. It's actually been the role model for a lot of people in life. Toxic love, toxic love has no respect or boundaries. So that's just the whole thing. In case you're wondering, when we talk about healthy, oh, the final thing about toxic love is it is conditional. It is conditional. It is a transaction. Okay. Healthy love, boundaries, and respect. So healthy love by default has respect and boundaries. Um, Healthy love is unconditional. There is no transaction whatsoever. There is also no benefit of doubt. It is pure acknowledgement of everything around it that does not align with those respect and boundaries. Healthy love does not exempt anyone to be included in their heart space. Healthy love, or healthy in general, just does not allow the games of toxicity not without mindful intent, because recklessness can abandon the healthy if you are not strict with yourself about it. So, when we talk about healthy love, first of all, it is unconditional. First of all, neither of the phrases "don't bite the hand that feeds you" does not exist in healthy love. It does not exist in unconditionality. Conditions, conditional love, toxic love uses that phrase. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. That is entitlement. That is transactional. I've done this for you, and if you bite me, I'm going to take it away from you. That's not love. It is games. And that is power. Power dynamic too. Um, so in healthy love, it's all about self. That's the thing. And sometimes when you turn your attention and your energy and your focus on yourself, meaning you're observing yourself, you're to yourself, you're mindful of yourself, you walk through life in alignment with yourself, you establish a real, true connection with whatever higher power, God, Buddha, you know, Lao Tzu, uh, any anything you believe in with self, that is self-love, because you are pouring into yourself. You are no longer relying on a hand to feed you, and you are also not the one who takes a horse to the river anymore. That's a choice. You know that phrase, you can take a horse to a river, but you cannot force it to drink. Yeah, that's kind of an outcome of that conditional love. When you begin to start servicing yourself, you'll realize that you've been taking people and horses to this river, and sometimes you've been trying to push them to drink, but they didn't want to. But then at the end of that, you'll realize that, at least for me, this is a completely my narrative. The horse didn't want to drink. It knew it was dehydrated. It did not want to drink. It chose not to drink. And yet each and every time, it still came to you to help you bring it back to the river each and every time. That is a toxic game as well. A horse that chooses dehydration and then chooses not to drink and then still returns back to you to bring it back to that very well that it decided on its own not to drink from. That's not, no. So, again, healthiness is all about being selfish. And it quite literally is, it's not arrogance. Arrogance, selfishness in the minds of toxic people is something that's horrible because inside they are arrogant. Most likely they exude characteristics of arrogance, and they believe that selfishness is arrogance, which is something that they are. Selfishness has nothing to do with arrogance. Selfishness is what it is. Selfishness is neutral. But what makes selfishness toxic or arrogance, I suppose, is toxicity. But what makes selfishness powerful is healthiness, right? Um, So again, love is all about self, pouring into yourself. Now, with that, because as you begin to do that, now what begins the next level that opens up, sometimes simultaneously, is boundaries. I believe boundaries are the first thing that opens up after you begin to pour into yourself. Because you begin to start to understand that the reckless activity and the recklessness of others with you was because you lacked boundaries. You didn't know what they were until you encountered them, right? So, in some sense, in a parallel sense, they served you in your highest good because what you didn't know, now you know. Now, I'm not saying that you couldn't have figured it out in a healthy way. You more than likely would have, but that wasn't the way that it happened. So we have to kind of look at it through this lens regardless. And so boundaries is the next thing that so boundaries are the next thing that comes up. And whatever it was that made you feel off, you're going to understand that that was because it was a boundary for you. It was something that was crossed. Someone crossed you. And the thing about it is the longer time that this went on for you, whether it's stemmed from childhood or it happened in maybe recent days with friends, you'll understand that there will be repressed emotions behind it because of so long you've allowed recklessness, reckless love to be the thing that you received. You allowed to receive reckless love. And so therefore, your body was already kind of adapted to that. And because of that, even though you felt off, it can't begin to sharpen until you begin to pour into self and to stop eating from the hands of recklessness. You stop receiving from that source and you start to pour into yourself, right? And so through that time that you have allowed and received reckless love was the exchange for emotional regulation, meaning you wouldn't be able you would basically dismiss and disregard your emotional needs, right? And that's when you allow reckless love into your life, you are dismissing your emotional needs. Your emotional boundaries are also being dismissed by you. And then, of course, the other person. But that's what conditional reckless love looks like. That's what you subscribe to, so that's what you receive. And so when you take that back and you begin to love unconditionally, the self-love that you put into yourself will next comes the boundaries, and the boundaries will look like a lot of those emotions that you couldn't feel through the reckless conditional love that you were receiving. Because the thing is, the emotions didn't go away. It's just that the more that you subscribe to that, the more that it is hoped by the people who give that to you that you don't let it get to you, that you just kind of let it go. You don't deal with the emotions. You just continually provide yourself with more reckless activity, reckless love. And that's why when it comes to pouring back into yourself, it can be very, very emotional because those emotions never went away. And emotions don't go away at all. Recklessness, mistakes, running away from things as erasure. Mm-mm. That's the biggest misconception there. And so here's kind of the thing, right? So your boundaries, they will come up through emotions. Now, as you work through those emotions, right? You sit with them, you journal with them, you create with them, therapy, whatever way you get them out. That's when the words, they start to form words for you. So they'll go from waves of emotion and high rise and just this ball of energy into something that settles into form. And that form is most likely words, words that you can use to articulate what exactly it is that you have felt, you are feeling. And then from that comes the boundary. So, for example, let's say it's something like anger. I'm angry that I allowed people to step all over me, to use me and my energy. Okay, that's the emotion said in articulate form, right? From that is the boundary. The boundary is literally the thing that you didn't receive, right? So I'm no longer going to allow people to step over me and use me. And that can be the first part of boundary, because notice how it's very vague, but it's still very powerful. The more that you walk through life with that boundary in place already in mind, the more clarity you're going to receive, the more articulation you're going to receive. It's not as if that's going to stop these recklessness people, because they're people. They still exist. But it's more like you're going to encounter it, and you're not going to receive it in the way that you once did, because you have that wall. Because you have it up, you're going to be able to look at the reckless love and conditional love and see it as for what it is, for what it always has been. And from there, that observance instead of the observance instead of the absorption of it, instead of receiving it, you're going to have more words to then add on to that layer of, I'm not allowing people to step all over me and use me anymore. And you're going to add something else, something like, by me protecting my da 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 da, this da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? You're going to add more layers to that cake. The last thing that follows, the more that you continually understand your boundaries and emotions, you just keep going through it, going through it, going through it, keep going back into yourself. It becomes a system. Unconditional love. Respect already starts to feed itself. It's like making sourdough, right? The process of making sourdough, the flour and the water already has yeast inside of it. So the sugar created from the water and the flour is already feeding to the yeast, which then begins its fermentation process. And the fermentation process is a continual cycle of feeding and feeding and feeding. And it has all to do with the temperatures, how well it can sustain itself, whether it gets too acidic, or whether it freezes and stagnates, or it slowly ferments. So it's that same thing. It's just one after another. It just flows. It's a flow or a system. And so respect is already what's coming. is already there. You already have self-respect automatically. Because respect was never about don't bite the hand that feeds you, respect me because I feed you. That's not what respect is anymore. Not for you anymore, at least. Because respect is now through you. Because you're the hand that feeds you. So you respect yourself. You respect the boundaries. And so anything less, to receive anything less, would be crossing your own boundaries. So it comes through accountability. That's something that you're already gonna learn. You don't have to teach yourself these things. Everything that we see being taught on the internet, we have life coaches that are like, I can be your accountability partner, I can teach you discipline. You won't have to pay a dime to anyone. You won't have to even stress yourself out about keeping routines and being on top of yourself. You won't even have to do that anymore because like I said, it just flows. It's literally the process of baking bread, sourdough bread, and it just flows one thing after another. And the only thing that you need to do is continually feed yourself. That is it. Feed yourself. Feed your sourdough. That's it. And the rest happens automatically by default. And now it might seem like, wow, because reckless conditional love, and it never talks about that stuff because that stuff doesn't exist. Not without conditions, not without a piece of you having to uphold one of their own, or not without you splitting a part of yourself for this relationship, not without you overextending a piece of yourself and still more than likely not even receiving anything in return. Because reckless love is abandonment. It is. It is not just abandonment of the people who receive it, but also of self, because whatever you receive is something that you are producing for your own self. So again, reckless love doesn't have any promises, but they like to talk about promises. But they know it's not something they're going to keep. It's just something that they say because they don't believe. They don't have any faith. They're reckless. They don't have any faith. They perform. They don't have any faith. And the only way they survive is through the faith that others hold for either the world, themselves, or for the people who are reckless toward them. Okay, that's all I have to say. All right, guys. If you enjoyed this, let me know. Leave a like. Um, and just remember, if it ain't love, if it ain't unconditional love, love is always unconditional. Love is never conditional. So whatever that is, they say love, what they call love is not love. So if it ain't love, then it's toxic. And I ain't going for that. Okay. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next one. Peace.